Welcome to the Mom Founders Table. Pull up a chair and join me every week as I become your thought partner and help you lead to create change. I'm your host, Kelsey Kenry, entrepreneur, millionaire mom of three, and strategic business coach for established mom entrepreneurs. Every week, you will get tactical guidance to apply to your business, leadership, and life that will help you further your true success while also being invited into a new way of thinking and being that creates true freedom. I'm here to call you out and call you up, so take a seat and let's begin. Welcome back to another episode of the Mom Founders Table, and this one is for the moms. Like, can we just have a minute to truly recognize and celebrate ourselves? Like, do you realize that as a mom running a business that you are literally doing the two hardest things? Like, I know it's easy for us to move from one thing to the next and never celebrate or recognize ourselves. But honestly, parenting and entrepreneurship, there's so much overlap. There's so much that one teaches the other and helps us to be better. But can we just have a moment to where maybe you actually put your hands on your heart and say, thank you. Thank you to yourself. Because by choosing entrepreneurship as a parent, you are doing the hard work to show your children that they can create anything that they want. And while there can be so much pressure to perform and to provide, truly, I would take this pressure over working for somebody else any day of the week. So thank yourself, recognize yourself, and let's talk today about how becoming a mother has made me, and probably you, a better entrepreneur, and lessons that motherhood has for entrepreneurship that we can apply, ruminate on, and implement into our day-to-day lives. You may or may not know this, but in 2016, I was sitting at my kitchen table. I had my laptop in front of me and the baby monitor right next to it. Your mom, you've been in this exact seat before. I was working on things for clients and watching my son sleep. And Cameron was my first child, born in 2016. I had been coaching. We had a gym and we had two of our online businesses. So at this point, all of that started in 2011 and 2012. So we had been doing this. And I sat there and I remember that I couldn't focus because I felt so torn. And if there is not a better visual than literally the laptop and the baby monitor right next to each other, I don't know what is, because that is our reality. And in that moment, I knew that I had to shift something in the way that I was doing business. I knew that as somebody who grew up with a lack of stability, parents that divorced at a young age, a mom that was doing her best but was not present, I knew that I wanted to do things different as a mom. And I also knew that since I had been self-employed and feeding myself and paying my own bills for many years from my business, that I had to do both. And I think one of the biggest lies that we tell ourselves is that we can't do both well. And from that moment, I was determined and decided that I was going to do both well. And I didn't know what it looked like. Back in 2016, there was not a lot of people speaking of motherhood and entrepreneurship because honestly, it just wasn't as big as it is now. And so I started with a lot of experimentation. And obviously all of that experimentation, everything that I've applied in my own life, in my own business, with my personal relationships, with my team, and working with clients across all industries, that's led me here. And that moment is a moment that I look back on so often because it was the moment, again, where I made the powerful decision of I'm not going to choose one or the other. I'm not going to settle for being less than in terms of the vision of the mom that I want to be. And I'm not going to pull back on my ambition. And so if you are like me, you likely want to do both and you want to do them well. So these are some of the things that motherhood has taught me that has made me a better entrepreneur and a better leader. One of the earliest things that I learned was how boundaries didn't filter people out. They filtered the right things in. And so I remember as a mom setting boundaries around when we would do things because we are a sleep schedule family and people didn't like that. But for me, it was worth people being upset about the rigidity of our family to make sure that my kids were well slept, because that made my life better. And it also is one of the reasons why I was able to plan and do both, because I knew when my kids would be sleeping, when they wouldn't be, when I needed to be mom, when I needed to be CEO. And so it was pretty early on that it was apparent that boundaries needed to be very clear in motherhood, and boundaries needed to be very clear in my business. So even down to implementing when I'll work, when I won't work, what my schedule looks like, what I do on certain days, and understanding and being okay with not everybody's gonna like this. And most people who didn't like it or don't like it just didn't fully understand it and why it was important to me. So I had to learn how to not just communicate boundaries, but also communicate and help people understand why those boundaries were important to me. And not from a place of justification, but from a place, especially in personal relationships, of this is important to me and this is how it works for our family. So I want you to know that wherever you are wavering or lacking in your boundaries, it's not only safe to set boundaries, but it is the way that you protect your time and protect your peace. Because I didn't want to build a reactive, firefighting, constantly on the go, yelling at my kids because I'm overwhelmed environment. Not that that hasn't happened, right? But I knew that that's not what I wanted to have. And so boundaries are what we put in place to filter the right things in. And so I want you to shift in your mind today how you think about boundaries, because we're afraid to set them because what we believe they are. We can set boundaries easier, and even in the way that we set them, right? It doesn't always have to be this hard line of I'm unwilling to do that. Some stuff does, of course. Like my kids will not be doing sleepovers. That's a hard line. But your compromise can be, I would love to do that meeting. It feels really important and I want to make sure that I'm 100% present. That time doesn't work for me. Here are some times that do. And it's only in entrepreneurship, especially with struggling with scheduling, that we run into this. Because if you call a doctor's office or a dentist's office, you're not like, oh, actually, I know you guys are closed, but can I come in after? right? So I want to just give you permission to set boundaries with the understanding that it will filter the right people in and that most people are more understanding than you may think. Another thing that I pretty quickly learned was that I had to prioritize what actually mattered. It's very easy for us to try to have everything as a priority, especially again, when we want to do well in motherhood and we want to do well in business, then everything is a priority, right? All of it is important. And I think here, what I've learned is that it's not about shifting something into it not being important. It's about shifting our timelines and our expectations so that we can have the priorities that we want. That being said, what I learned about priorities was actually that there's only one single priority, and that priority is me. And I think all of us, especially if you're a millennial like me, were probably raised with the idea that putting yourself first is selfish. I'm sure there's a story that you heard from a caregiver or a parent that maybe was those words exactly. But that's what we're told. That's what we feel. And so we don't feel safe to put ourselves first. But what I learned is that every time I put something else in front of me, it made me resentful. And obviously in motherhood, there are times where I was a breastfeeding mom, so it was like, my baby's crying, I have to feed them right now. That is not an option. But in the bigger grand scheme of things, my needs needed to be met first. My needs as a human and as a woman needed to be met first. I needed to be able to take care of my mental health and my physical health. And if I wasn't doing those things, everything else suffered. And so motherhood taught me that in order to be who I want to be for others, I need to be who I need to be for myself first. And it's only then that I'm able to serve at my highest and best, because I could put myself last. I could have stopped working out and chose business and meetings and work and churned out more. But would the health issues be worth it? Would how I felt in my mind and body be worth it? It wouldn't be. And to me, that's not success. Your time as a mom becomes very, very important. And so you start to question, are the things I'm actively spending time on directly connected to what is most important to me? And how do I feel with how I spend my time? And those are questions I want you to ask yourself today, because I can guarantee there's something that you're doing in your day-to-day or week-to-week that you know isn't serving you, that you're either afraid to let go of or afraid to set a boundary around. But motherhood taught me that the priority has to be me. To succeed as an entrepreneur, to succeed and to coach at my highest and best, to be able to strategize and evolve and grow, and for my brain to function fully, I need to move my body. I need to meditate. I need to go to sleep early so I can get 8 hours of sleep. Foundations matter. You are the priority. Another thing that I learned, especially after having my second, right? So if you are not aware, I have 3 children. They are currently 9, 6, and 3. And after having my second, it's another job. right? You have added another human, another dependent, another responsibility to your day to day. And so everything was like 2 times. It's 2 times not only the work, but also 2 times the questioning yourself, the doubting if you're showing up correctly, the doubting of if you're doing things right, the questioning of how can I do both once again, right? And reevaluating things. But I learned to stop making my decisions from a place of fear or a place of guilt or a place of what other people wanted for me, and instead started making decisions for the long term. So the way that Eric and I have chosen to parent is the reality that we are creating adults is always at the forefront, meaning that we make decisions in the short term that are going to be best for the long term gain. And that alignment that we have in our parenting also crosses over into my business, because it's very easy for us to get caught up in comparison or trends or I should, and we're chasing and we forget to step back and go back into what is the best thing for the long-term vision. And in fact, I had somebody, that was asking about my business and how I structure things in my offer. And she was asking me about, private coaching. And she mentioned, we used to do private coaching and it was just something that we found just wasn't super scalable. And I responded and I said, honestly, working on a one-to-one level is not scalable in the short term. There is an actual capacity that I have, and I'm limited to the number of clients that I can take. And so in the short term, that is not scalable. But the reality is that I will always have one-to-one private coaching as an offer, because that high touch is something that no matter how the market shifts, no matter what changes with AI, that is not something you can replicate. And so while it might not look in the short term with capacity, as far as I can take X amount of clients and make X amount of dollars and that's it, sure. But if you can do that for 14 years, I would say that is scalable. And it's not always about scalability, right? We want to have a good balance of foundation and scalability. So I'm unwilling to just say, well, I can't, this is preventing me from making more in the short term, so I'm not going to do it anymore. And so learning to make decisions with the long term in mind of, this is something that I will always do because I love it, because there will always be a need, and because it works, is scalable. And it's aligned for me, right? And so I think really learning to make decisions with that long-term view in mind of like, is this a quick hit just to get a dopamine hit? Is this just something that I'm doing because somebody else in my industry is doing it? Or is this something that I can sustain? Is this something that is aligned with the life that I want to have? So learning to make those decisions and really that overlap coming from parenting of this baby, and how we parent and how we show up for this child will determine who they become. And so while it feels easier to make a decision that may pacify the current circumstance, that's going to bite you in the ass. And I don't want to make decisions like that in my business, even though I have, and I've learned from them, right? So learning to make decisions from a place of really looking at the long term instead of just the short term. anything that we are good at as moms is we know how to pivot. We know how to take a complete shit show of a situation and turn it into fun and games. Like, parenting for me has been a reminder of the freedom to choose the path of like, okay, this kid is having a tantrum. I can either lose my marbles or I can see there is an emotional need here and I need to stop what I'm doing and comfort so that we can move through this emotion, so that they can feel the emotion, so they can feel safe. So when we are parenting, one thing that I know with having 3 kids is that I've had to pretty much let go of all of my expectations around like how I thought they would act or how certain events would go. It's like, it's the ones that take like the most planning and sometimes the most money that you're like, well, that was a shit show. But you expected it would be great. And it's like, that's not fair to pin that on them. And so there's an element of just really knowing how to pivot situations to where this isn't working, this doesn't feel good, somebody's throwing a tantrum, this is not a good idea. What can we do? Right? Because with parenting, you don't have an option of quitting. You can't just be like, actually, return to sender. You have to be like, well, this is the child that I was gifted and I gotta ride the wave. And so what do I control? Me. Respond. And so parenting has taught me how to pivot, how to respond differently to situations, how to let go of expectations that and control that is not mine, and how to come back to my own personal responsibilities of what is in my control. And I'm so thankful because I think this is like, as an entrepreneur, you have to be able to, in a moment, in a launch, in a new service, in a client project, you have to be able to think on your feet. And there is nothing that will teach you to think on your feet as when you are driving, you have a kid puking, and your phone's ringing at the same time. Like, we get it. But mostly, it's just being able to go into this zone of like, I'm in a shit show. There's no exiting the shit show. And so what are the solutions to get through it? How are we getting to the other side of this? And that's literally every day in parenting. So if you can endure that, like entrepreneurship, I would say, you may disagree. I would love for you to DM me if you're listening to this. DM me on Instagram and tell me, do you believe that parenting is harder or entrepreneurship is harder? I want to know. This is my curious mind, putting that out there. I believe parenting is harder. I believe, and it could just be all the standards that I have for parenting and for myself, but I want to hear from you. So the last thing that, is the last lesson that I really wanted to share with you today is I really learned how to stop proving my worth through hustling and productivity. Because like, your kids don't care how hard you work. They care how much you work. They care if you're working instead of being present with them. They care if you're showing up for them emotionally or if you're shutting down. They care about those things, but never wanted to be an example to my kids that success meant I was never with them. That success meant sacrificing motherhood. And so while it is a different type of challenge to be able to show up for both, to be able to do both well, it's a challenge that I wake up every single day grateful for. And so realizing that I could churn out so many more hours of work in each of my days. And with that, what would it all be for? And I think that's a question that we don't ask often enough, is why are we doing this? And what do we really want? And what is it all really for? For me, being able to strategize with business owners to help them feel fulfilled both personally and professionally, to be able to help women work less and earn more, is deeply rooted in the experience that I shared with you today of building that for myself, of recognizing that I wasn't going to choose ambition or motherhood. It's undoing this corporate mindset that has been recreated in entrepreneurship, to where the accessibility that we have as entrepreneurs then becomes our path to burnout. I'm not better if I work more. I'm not better because of how much I'm serving other people and neglecting myself. And so I've made sure that I model in my behaviors and in my work and in how I separate things and in the boundaries that I have. I make sure that that's modeled for my kids and for my clients, because I have to embody the work that I do as well. So if you have ever felt like you have had to compartmentalize motherhood to be a good entrepreneur, or you feel like that being the mom that you want to be is holding you back from entrepreneurship, if you feel like this pull of one or the other, and you're struggling to see how you can honor your ambition and continue to grow and expand and make the impact that you want with your business, and you feel torn between showing up for your business, showing up for yourself, showing up for your family, and if you're questioning, like, how can you do this forever? And how can you sustain this? I want you to know that this is a structural issue within the business that can be fixed. And this is why I'm so passionate about helping clients implement the right business model, the right team, the right offers, so that instead of it feeling like this constant guilt loop, you're able to work less and earn more, so that you actually feel and are succeeding in both areas. So I want to hear from you guys on if you think parenting or entrepreneurship is harder. And I would love to hear some lessons that motherhood has taught you and how motherhood has made you a better entrepreneur. So if you don't already follow me on Instagram, I'm Kelsey Henry on there. My DMs are open. I want to hear from you, and it is always me in my DMs as well. And I would love to just have this conversation with you. And if you do feel torn and you want to talk about what it looks like to build a business model and a structure that is so fulfilling for your ambition and also gives you more revenue, more profit, and more peace and fulfillment in your home, so you're not so reactive, we can talk about that too. So DM me, parenting or entrepreneurship. Let me know which is harder to you, and share your most valuable lesson that motherhood has taught you. I can't wait to hear from you, and I will talk to you guys next week.